Island Hospitality. It will be moderated by Mr. Siddharth Thaker, Managing Director, Prognosis Global Consulting. Mr. Thaker will be joined on stage by Mr. Rohit Ravi, Managing Director, Appaswamy Real Estate, Mr. Saurabh, Global Brand Operations and Business Development Beyond Green, Executive Vice President, South and Southeast Asia, Middle East, Africa and Australasia, Preferred Hotels and Resorts. Mr. Suresh Mutha, Managing Director, Mohan Mutha Enterprises, and Mr. Thilan Wijesinghe, Co-founder and Director, Ceylon Tea Trails and Resplendent Ceylon. The panel will be opening up for questions throughout the session, and we urge you to please post your questions on the app. Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for making it post-lunch. Generally, post-lunch is essentially a more relaxed time for everyone. And on behalf of Hotelivate and the HICSA team, welcome to all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
To begin with, what's very interesting is last 3 years probably has been the greatest black swan event for a lot of us who've been in the hotel hospitality space. And what I'd like to understand is get your opening remarks of how has life really changed from riding Cloud9 to seeing probably the lowest level of traffic and revenue and business in your respective markets, and now all of a sudden a very, very rapid V-stage recovery. So if I may start by Saurabh getting your perspective, because for a very long time you understand Maldives, you understand Sri Lanka. What has really changed over the last 2 or 3 years as far as island hospitality is concerned?
Sure. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Pleasure to be here. So just a couple of headline observations. First up is the fact that what the last 2 years made us recognize is the fact that there was a lot of obsolescence and fatigue already sitting in standards, operations, design, service format, etc., that all of us were acknowledging, recognizing, but probably not as immediately willing to address, because it needed capital investment, so why fix it if it ain't totally broken? That was a school of thought. But the speed and velocity of change that we observed in the last couple of years completely thwarted that, and it made us shelve the manual of yesterday and embrace and accept the reality that we have to rescript the ways going forward. That's the first observation. Second observation is the fact that this reset pretty much evened and leveled out the playing field. Because in the world of yesterday, there were clear business leaders, there were prominent brands and less than prominent brands. But with this reset, with the pandemic hitting everyone with equal intensity, everyone found themselves at a flat zero level, right? And in our observation, brands that broke out of that state of inertia quicker to acknowledge that yes, we've been hit, and embrace this change as an opportunity to bounce back, and were able to acquire that confidence to restack the resources and get started again, were the first off the gates, who demonstrated that after falling flat on the ground, there is a possibility to accelerate, and they became the flag bearers for this belief that was spread to the entire destination of Maldives in particular, which ended up having some of the best years since its inception as a destination in terms of ADR and occupancies combined. So just the recognition of this crisis being an opportunity and having a speed of response with reasonable confidence demonstrated this ability to really come from zero to the top of the wall. So those were the two high-level observations that we saw pan out as a remarkable example that gave confidence to many other destinations around the world.
Right. Thanks for that. Rohit, you essentially sit on the other side of the fence, if I may use that term. How has COVID or last couple of years been for you as an owner, and If I may ask, are you still as excited about hospitality? Are we going to see you do more hotels?
So, I mean, apart from the Maldives, we have hotels in India as well.
Correct.
But to be in context, I think we opened the St. Regis in 2016. And we had a very strong opening. And obviously, we were reaching our stabilized revenue. And when COVID hit. And then, like many of the other hotels in the Maldives, we were closed for a few months. But we opened quickly, and the country developed a method of working where you test before reaching, and you test on arrival, and you test before leaving. And and it was, by nature, the place is, you're isolated when you go to your island. You're not exposed to a large traffic of, you're not in crowded places. So that worked well in that country. And I think we have, after the first 2-3 months after we opened in 2020, we have been doing numbers better than pre-COVID. And the demand has been really strong. And this is despite having 0 people from China, 0 inflow from China. So we've replaced it with, I mean, the market kind of, got other markets to come in, like India and other countries. So, I mean, I think for example, the first quarter, Jan to March, I think we have done our record number far better than we did a 95% occupancy in March at a $2,300 ADR. I mean, it's numbers, these are like, for March, it's unbelievable. And I think this month is looking like that, and the booking window for the next 2-3 months, it's looking strong. But obviously, once more destinations open, I think this will slow down a bit. So I was excited before COVID, I'm excited right now, and I knew even during COVID, things will recover. So we celebrate the good times, and even when things get back to normal, I think, our fundamentals are strong when we got into the project.
So if I may essentially use an anecdote, a recurring theme over the last 2 days that we've seen is 2019 is not really a benchmark for somebody who's essentially been an asset owner in Maldives. Is that correct assessment?
I think in the case of St. Regis, we saw every year a small growth.
Right.
Small growth, but it wasn't probably the best. Maybe in terms of, it's not the best year of all the years past it, but we were seeing year-on-year growth as far as this market was concerned. Because our penetration was getting better in different source markets. And
right. Suresh, let me come to you from a slightly different perspective on the last 3 years. I mean, it's an acknowledged fact that hospitality probably has been one of the most affected segments, right? All of a sudden, everything just vanished. And what excites you about hospitality? Because you're essentially a new kid in on the block, if I may say so, as for hospitality. And what excites you about hospitality, and specifically why Maldives?
All right, good afternoon, everybody. It's been a pleasure being here. For somebody who have been present in the Maldives for the last 40 years, we started as suppliers of construction materials then. We established the logistics services where we owned a fleet of tugs, barges, landing crafts, where we were able to deliver all the construction materials right to the point of their requirement. Because Maldives is like, a cluster of islands. The logistics plays the most important role in terms of even the cost. So we were able to solve this problem for them, in terms of supplies of construction materials and the logistics. So for somebody who's been involved and seeing the market grow from where we've grown as an exporter, of course, indeed, we saw the impact during the COVID. There was a time where in 2020 especially, it's almost come to a standstill. I mean, even our exports were like, our ships were grounded and we were not doing any business. And literally the whole Maldives was not doing. But one really good thing about Maldives is that they really recouped back much faster than the rest of the world. In July of 2020, for example, the country opened up to tourism, right? And the first month when they opened, you could actually see a lot of tourists, a lot of flights coming in, private jets coming in. And they had very innovative ways, to really market there. They said, isolation. I mean, everybody were talking about quarantines and isolation. Have you ever seen isolation this good ever other than Maldives? That is a kind of marketing. And the reason why Maldives in my mind really came back faster than the other market is that Maldives is, one island, one resort kind of a format, most of it. And once you have sort of vaccinated everybody, the confidence in your travelers, your customers is that much more. And you are pretty much going without mask even in the middle of the pandemic. So with that respect, I think Maldives was, in my mind, the least affected in terms of tourism. There was a lull period, but they really came back faster. And I think that the indication of our growth, our revenues in terms of our exports and shipping, is also an indication that much better things are happening in the Maldives. More resorts are being developed as we talk, apart from the ones which are already in operations. The government is also coming out with a lot of new resort tendering out, things to that. So that's my view.
Right. So Thilan, coming to you, one thing that I personally would like to know, and I think a lot of our audience also wants to understand, is give us your perspective on Sri Lanka. Is it a lot more noise? How's the country? What's the ground situation? Just probably your insight on probably one of the most favorite travel destinations for all of us in India. We are a little bit worried whether we should go to Sri Lanka or not. Love to get your perspective on what's really happening.
So if I may respond to that question, which is quite propitious considering the amount of news that has been put out on Sri Lanka. One thing that can describe us is resilience. So Sri Lanka is a country that has had a triple whammy, in fact, over the last 3 years. First, we had the April 2019 Easter attacks. Then we had COVID, and now we have something of an economic crisis. But through all this, Sri Lanka has managed to reinvent itself. And I think what we are going through at the moment is a realization that the brotherhood that was able to win the war cannot manage the economy. So in 2009, the then government was able to defeat terrorism. There was a massive resurgence in tourism. Unlike most countries that should have followed some level of fiscal prudence, Sri Lanka went on a spending spree, borrowing heavily, white elephant projects, airports in the middle of nowhere, various other types of infrastructure that has not generated a return, somewhat similar to some hoteliers who have built hotels at $1 million a key without worrying about ROI. So all these issues combined with rank economic mismanagement starting from the month that COVID outbroke by the incumbent administration is why we have ended up in this current situation. Now, it is not a big problem. It is really a $5 billion problem. A bunch of high net worth families in Mumbai can solve Sri Lanka's fiscal problem. But nevertheless, there is a resilience in the country and a level of maturity. So the violence that you're hearing about is really an exaggeration. Everyone from my wife to the average man on the street has been on the streets protesting. I didn't have the time because I was here. And we are seeing the changes happening. The entire economic team, barring the president, is now out of a job. That was responsible for the current crisis. From the finance minister, secretary of the treasury, central bank governor. A new, highly recognized and reputed economic team has just taken up office. I don't want to mention them by name. That's a sign of optimism. We have made very firm commitments that we will get under an IMF program and therefore be entitled to the credit support in the form of about $5 to $6 billion until such time tourism and various other export revenues start kicking in. So it's not a problem like Lebanon. And for me to sort of give a final comment on this, myself along with my partners and clients, we are investing because we are looking at the situation 3 to 5 years down the road. I'm both in investment banking as well as real estate. Small luxury hotels is my passion. So I have clients and partners who have just embarked on about $500 to $600 million worth of construction in the Colombo port city. I'm in charge of the development of South Asia's first properly designed marina and marina hotel. We'll be looking for brands. I'm going to be talking to Manav about it shortly. There's a $450 million financial city building that's under construction. Apart from that, along with my partner in a land on the East Coast, Atul Chodia or Panchil, we are planning to invest in a wildlife theme resort. So in my view, tourism will take a short-term hit because of the perception and obviously the power shortages. There will be new capacity added, but nevertheless, Sri Lanka will remain a country that is highly marketable, and that is shown by the statistics. Every time during COVID, the airport opened even for a couple of months, we immediately saw a resilience and a jump in average room rates, and there was particularly a couple of sectors that performed very well post-COVID in the Sri Lankan market. The small luxury segment, the hotel Ceylon Tea Trails that I'm a co-founder and shareholder of. We are now at significantly higher average room rates than what we were at pre-COVID rates. On a room basis, we are at about $700 a night. On an all-inclusive basis, we are an all-inclusive hotel, we are at about 1,000 US. The wellness sector has turned around, and the wildlife sector, coupled by heritage and small luxury tourism. And the other sector that has turned around fastest are international brands, such as the Anantara. So that's, in summary, the situation in Sri Lanka. I feel perfectly safe, but we're waiting to see what happens during this transition period where the people are rejecting the rank economic mismanagement that took place in Sri Lanka over the last 24 months.
Right. Saurabh, you Preferred Hotels essentially has a fairly strong presence in Sri Lanka as a market, and you've essentially been looking at that market for what's your take in terms of tourism-specific impact on what's essentially unfolding in Sri Lanka?
I think, pardon my candor, but I think it's a perfect example of a destination with phenomenal potential, but perfectly implosive tendencies, right? I remember, I'll rewind the clock back to 2018, where Sri Lanka was actually called out as the fastest emerging tourism destination at the Virtuoso Travel Week in Las Vegas, right? And there was such euphoria around it. The product of experiential luxury travel Sri Lanka got right way earlier. The science of destination management led by 3 or 4 of the marquee brands who are in destination management as well as hotels, they solved for it way earlier. So in terms of product and on-ground expertise and this genuine hospitality and warmth that Sri Lanka brings in. You talk sustainability, environment, diversity, cuisine, wellness. It ticks all the boxes, right? But I think this entire chaotic phase for Sri Lanka really started in 2019, to your point, from the bombings. And I was hoping, demonstrated by Maldives, Sri Lanka was the next organic expansion after having seen that what it takes to solve for it, just get your medical board, tourism board, your airline, and your hotels all aligned together, right? If you get those ducks in a row, you've got ways to go. And Maldives demonstrated that, right? And the smaller the tourism economy, the easier it seems, at least on the outside, to solve for this. But no, it never happened in Sri Lanka. So my views going forward are aligned with what Thilan said, that it has got tremendous amount of potential, but I do believe that at the international scale, it's terribly, terribly under-marketed, right? It has sent confusing signals. So the luxury tourism advisors are not totally sure whether to view Sri Lanka as a pure luxury wellness play, whether to continue to view Sri Lanka as sustainability. For sustainability, Sri Lanka was one of the earliest to the stage, right? But I don't think it's pushed the envelope as hard and fast as the destination provides for. So there need to be a clear tourism agenda, and not just for Sri Lanka. Generally, I feel, if you see island hospitality, there are a few hotspots in the world, right? There's the Caribbean, the Mediterranean, the Indian Ocean, and Southeast Asia. These are largely 4 or 5 of these blue treasures around the world, right? And the guys who have been able to get all the tourism stakeholders aligned and project a very clear tourism agenda and position the destination with its clear strong points, they are the winners, clearly. And wherever there has been, misalignment and confusion of messages, because sometimes hotel fraternity is angling X and the destination is angling Y. And that confuses the buyers immediately, especially in farther away market. So I feel great potential, but a lot of work to be done in creating the sense of priority in the tourism agenda and to just go out and execute that agenda out. Right? And it's no more enough to just attend the international trade shows, luxury events, put up a booth or a stand out there and interact with one small segment of luxury product buyers. It is a completely integrated sales, marketing, PR, advertising, social strategy that needs to proactively push this priority agenda out. Until that happens, I think, we'll just see this organic push, but this inorganic boost that the economy needs to bounce back is not going to come by.
Right, thanks for that. Rohit, let me come to you with a slightly different question, which is that very rapidly the world is opening up. We are getting very rapidly out of the bio bubble mechanisms. All flights are now slowly moving towards full capacity. In a scenario where travel across the world is going to come back to normalcy, if I may use that term, what is your opinion? How are you seeing the momentum for reservations, for rates, etc. in Maldives? Do you think the best is yet to come? Will Maldives be able to sustain the growth momentum that has been witnessed over the last 2 years? Because it's very interesting that what even Jesper said yesterday is for Maldives, it is essentially a reverse curve. So when the whole world was essentially seeing degrowth, Maldives saw probably the most exponential growth that the market has seen. Is that sustainable?
I think when other destinations open up, definitely it's going to take away some of the business because a lot of destinations are opening up and they're opening up fast. So I think it's natural that some of this crowd gets split amongst more destinations as they open up. And I think going forward, the best players in the Maldives will continue to do well, but will they do as well as they've been doing during this period of the last 1 year? Maybe, maybe not. It depends on the hotel, their marketing strategy, their USPs. So for example, even though we have been doing so well, we have decided we're investing about this June, July, we're not operating the resort for 30, 40 days, and we're adding a new restaurant, we're upgrading some facilities, we're spending $7, $8 million. And we are very bullish on the market in the long run. So we want to do well and remain a market leader, the top 2, 3 hotels in the country for the next years and decades to come. So with that kind of vision, these slight changes in market, not slight changes, but I'm just saying we might not be at the peak that we are at now. But even if it goes down, I want that to be a solid position. I don't want it to slip too much, and I want to perform consistently well for the years to come and to be on the minds of people when they think of the Maldives. So I think when the fundamentals are strong like that, we'll always do well, but obviously the macro factors will decide how well really that well is.
Right. Another very interesting thing that we've heard as a recurring discussion through the pandemic period and even in the last 2 days of 1.5 days of the conference we've been here, sustainability or essentially eco-consciousness, eco-architecture, it's now become more not as a fashion, but essentially an essential for tourism going forward. Suresh, if I may start with you, you've essentially over the last 4 decades essentially serviced a very difficult ecosystem. If you can share with us what are some of the new things that are happening? Is eco-sensitivity or is environmental consciousness an essential part, or is it still somewhere in the periphery?
I think this is quite evident. There's something called responsible tourism, which exactly means which is combined with wellness. The wellness now in the Maldives, for example, of late, there are many resorts which are now completely focusing on wellness. There are specific wellness programs, the best of the world. You have Western, the Eastern, Indian, the Oriental. and they kind of give an experiential, quality time to the guests who come in, right? So, and besides that, Maldives offer, as a destination, it offers surfing, it offers diving, it offers wellness, it offers leisure, and in all brackets, in terms of, you have resorts, which is one island, one resort. You have guest house concept, which has been introduced by the government of Maldives, where the government of Maldives is renting out or leasing out spaces from inhabited islands. And there, what they're trying to do is another segment where they want the guest to really interact with the islanders and get accustomed with the culture of the islanders, the history of those islands. So it's a very different things that the government of Maldives is trying to do and tourism is trying to promote. So I think as long as they continue to offer this variety, and coming back to this wellness, and I think this is one growing concept world over. We have seen, and especially after the pandemic, I mean, people want to really spend on their health and the well-being and the being fit and being healthy. I think, and the other aspect that I've also seen in the Maldives is that people have started traveling with the entire family. Maldives earlier was a destination for only couples. I mean, it was like a romantic destination. But since this wellness, which is, moving away from that, only the spa thing, which was considered as wellness, now you have in terms of your diet, the nutrition, the mindfulness, everything that they are offering is towards the healthy family. And then they are creating, things for even the children of the family. And as parents, they really like to come to destinations like this where they can, as a family, stay for a long period of time and enjoy being, that eco-friendly tourism, that responsible tourism, and go back more energized. So I think that aspect is also growing in the Maldives in my mind.
Right. No, so very refreshing to hear this is, even at Prognosis, we've always held a very strong view because there's an ongoing debate for many years which says, can a hotel be vegetarian? You probably have given confidence to a lot of us. You're not just doing vegetarian, but you're essentially doing a vegan resort, right?
Yep, that's right.
Right, awesome. So a new direction, and we all would probably get you back someday and get your experience on that. Thilan, before I come to you, I just want Rohit to validate something. Would you do something like that? Or you think the market is just too international to be able to?
I think I'm too conservative personally to do something like that, but definitely I'm sure there's a niche the market's very big, there are different types of clients. I'm sure there's a niche there could be a niche, I think, for something like that, because wellness is becoming so big. And
So Thilan, coming back to the theme of ecotourism, responsible, sustainable tourism, the tea trails will essentially probably set a benchmark, if I may use that, on how successfully you can integrate experiences as a part of an ecosystem. Will you share some good practices? Can you give us some secret sauce that we can take off you and kind of mix it in our markets as well?
Yes, thanks for that question, Siddharth. So Tea Trails was conceived by myself and one of my mentors who, an Englishman, when I was involved in running a very boring city hotel company, which is now the owning company of the Cinnamon Grand and Cinnamon Lakeside in Colombo, owning about 800 hotel rooms in Colombo. We subsequently sold that company to John Keels. We said, this is really not tourism. And then Nick, my English partner, said, hey, I was born in Malaysia. Aren't these tea plantations beautiful? I said, oh yes, I had an uncle who had a beautiful tea plantation. And what we did was, Nick was an avid hiker. So I was simply focusing on refurbishing the bungalows. He said, no, let us find at least 4 to 5 bungalows and see whether we can connect them through walking trails that would walk through forests and tea gardens. But we were never sure whether the operating model would work. Then into the equation, we brought in a Spaniard who was a hiking enthusiast. His wife had just moved to Sri Lanka. There's a moral to this story. So we gave him a motorcycle and couple of $1,000 and said, go travel the length and breadth of Sri Lanka and find the ideal location for a tea trail based on these 10 criteria: temperature, rainfall, whether there was water bodies to land seaplanes, fauna, flora, etc. After 3.5 months of traveling a few hundred or maybe 1,000 kilometers, he came back and said, Bogantala Valley number 2, Muskelia Valley number 1. We happened to locate tea trails at the Bogantala Valley. Then we, of course, pitched the idea to Dilmati, who said, gladly, we'll take a majority interest. Now, Nick and I, we didn't have confidence in the business model that it would work. Because this, I believe, the consultants can advise me on that, whether it's a blue ocean or not. This, I believe, was the first time that a single hotel with single management teams was built in an area of 54 square kilometers. So it's what I call the dispersed resort model. 27 keys dispersed in 5 bungalows in an area of 50 square kilometers without replicating infrastructure. So we operate on the mothership and satellite concept. Now, I did not create that concept. So the fourth cog in the wheel who helped us operationalize this crazy vision that Nick and I and later Dilmati had, we brought in a Swiss. Who better than a Swiss from the Lausanne School of Hotel Management? So the moral of the story is that it took a bunch of Sri Lankans, an Englishman, a Spaniard, and a Swiss to create a world-class business model long before fresh air or eco-tourism became the norm of the day. We knew at that time, even before starting a beach resort, we said one day fresh air was going to be at a premium. So this is a place where you would come and enjoy, whether it's, we thought rain would be a marketing feature because it does rain quite a lot. So the other important lesson from Tea Trails was much more than eco, because we were eco to start with. No generators, no air conditioners, because air is quite cool, no televisions in the rooms. There was no mobile connectivity at the time, but now we have internet. Was the connection with the community. We found that when high-end tourists come to an area where there's relative poverty, that we found that the community was not interfacing with the guests quite that well. So we brought in the Dilma Foundation to connect with the community. So now there's congruence between community relations and a concept, because you are locating a very high-end resort in a relatively low-income destination. So in terms of, we believe that the whole concept of living in a bungalow where every room is different, because each bungalow is designed where no 2 rooms are equivalent. So can you imagine the logistics of having 27 different types of rooms and dining rooms and areas? And then we thought, okay, we must create multiple locations for dining. So the least used area is the community dining area. So you have summer houses, you can have picnics and do your dining, you can dine by the poolside, etc. So essentially, I hope I answered your question. Yes. So we were accidentally, we plunged into both a business model and some concept of responsible tourism, which is now being scaled up, and I'm planning to do more trail-based resorts in the future.
Right. Thank you so much for that. So, I mean, we are almost halfway into our discussion. So, if everybody's okay, there are a few questions which are there. So, why don't we first address that and then probably take our discussion forward. Saurabh, there's a question which is specified, I mean, that's essentially targeted with you. Saurabh mentioned the popular island destinations. Have any of you kind of considered offbeat destinations, right? So, yeah, Saurabh, you want to take that first, and then probably I'll add.
Sure. So, we are very fortunate that in our business model, which is all about working with independent owners who operate their own brands, we are in a great vantage point to have early access to developments in diverse upcoming destinations. So we consider it all the time, and trust me, whether it's domestically within India, Sri Lanka, Maldives, or anywhere in the world, what excites us the most is when there is a destination out of the ordinary that's going to either initiate and start a whole new itinerary altogether, or extend an existing itinerary into by way of a new experience. So we are very open to the idea, and every year we board close to anywhere between 50 to 70 hotels, and I can comfortably say that at least 15 to 20% of that is by way of expanding into new markets, stroke destinations. So we are always very open and very excited about this.
Yeah, and Saurabh, to just kind of validate what you're saying also is, if I may take the last about 18 odd months, we're now in India tracking close to about 90 unique destinations which have zero brand penetration. I think one rapid shift that I have seen in my 2 decades of consulting is this whole YOLO effect, right? While essentially it's a very millennial term, but I think you only live once is now become so much more ingrained in how people approach travel, tourism, holidays, etc. So, yeah, I mean, not just for island destinations, I think even for a geography like India, where there's so many popular tourist destinations as well, absolutely. I think the next 5 to 7 years, you're going to see emergence of a lot of niche destinations with no brand or no asset penetrations all of a sudden emerging. And there also lies a beautiful opportunity for resorts to become destinations.
Sure.
I think a historical growth model was somebody doing an asset in a market and trying to capture the demand which was in that destination. I think going forward, there's a huge opportunity for someone to essentially make the asset itself as a destination. So yes. Next question, how can hotels and tourism contribute to the sustainability efforts of island destinations? Rohit, you want to take that?
Yeah, sure. I think building a resort in the Maldives is actually, I mean, everything is shipped in. There's nothing that you get locally. So from an eco perspective of the actual construction process, you know, there's a lot of carbon that we're burning in the process. So, I mean, there's no ways around that. And the way we run the resorts is, it's 95% of the resorts, or maybe 99%, they're all run on diesel generators. And of course, now people are mitigating some of it with solar panels and all that. So it's actually, I mean, it takes a lot of energy to run an operation in remote locations. And but what we, at this time of designing the resort, you know, even though we chose St. Regis as an operator, we did not want this, you know, typical luxury hotel where, you know, it's just about conspicuous consumption and luxury and everything. So what we did is, through the materials used, like timber and the architecture, where we had all nature-inspired architecture, and we tried to communicate a message. And because we knew that we are doing something that's, you know, it's a very conscious decision, because along with my development team, the architect, contrary to what, I mean, not that Marriott said anything otherwise, but what an operator would say, we thought, let's do something that, you know, that connects, that educates people, and it's edutainment to some level with architecture, and, you know, a kind of program where they kind of, you know, see, you know, these different buildings and how it connects to the sea, and it shows the fragility of the environment. So we thought that's the best way we could at least, you know, connect to our guests in that way. But of course, if you're talking about lower energy consumption and being more sustainable, using glass bottles, I mean, I think that many resorts are doing, and people are doing all over the world.
I think that's now become a minimum denomination of entry, and not really
tickets to the game. Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah.
So, do you mind if I add a few thoughts too?
Of course, of course.
Great, okay. So we feel very strongly about that, because we just launched during the pandemic a brand called Beyond Green. We call it Planet Earth's Most Sustainable Hotels, and we launched this brand with 25 founding members around the world. We have 30 right now. And I just want to make 3 quick points. I think my fellow panelists made some incredible points on sustainability 5 minutes ago. And these 3 points are, first is commitment, second is differentiation, and third is guest engagement. So by commitment, what I mean is, there has to be a sincerity and a totality of pursuit when going after sustainability, because it's really become a very, very deep domain. And hospitality, like for technology, has been a laggard. It's been a late embracer of technology. it's also not one of the foremost industries to be embracing sustainability. I mean, think of Patagonia in apparels, right? They're talking sustainability since 30 years ago. So whilst we've had some sustainable brands and focus on sustainability, all I'm saying is that now a thesis could be written. There's so much of copious material on sustainability, right from design, technology, F&B, wellness, construction, architecture. It is a whole study by itself. So one has to go immersively deep into it and commit to the cause of sustainability. And it's not a one-time effort. It is a pursuit that lasts over the lifetime of the development. Second is differentiation. Now, if you look at destinations like Maldives, or any destination for that matter, one must acknowledge that if there are 100 resorts in Maldives, all of them have equal access to whatever is the sustainability story of the destination. So how are you going to differentiate yourselves? So I have personally, I'm sure some of us have experienced more, I've experienced maybe 30 plus resorts in the Maldives, and I feel that there is a sincere but a common theme in sustainability, whether it's turtle preservation or a commitment to some local community. There's a small tuck shop next to the check-in area, and the entire sustainability pursuit of the resort is centered around one sustainability expert, and if he or she is not on the shift, there is no connection to sustainability at all. So how are you going to differentiate? What is the story? Do you have one passion project that your resort is so sincere about that you are a global leader and a flag bearer of that campaign? And that is part of your story in every single communication that you send out in the market. And third and last part is about guest engagement. How are you going to, if you've invested time, thought, effort, human capital into scripting your story, is sustainability only a small aspect of your entire experience, or have you taken the time to intersperse the entire element of sustainability in every single touch point, right from the check-in, in-room, public areas, wellness, food and beverage, marketing? Every single component of your story should send out a consistent and a very elaborate, inclusive message on the sustainability front. So I think all of it put together is what encompasses a total sustainability aptitude of a resort.
Yeah. Suresh, being a very important part of the supply chain management in a very fragile environment, biggest operational challenges in your opinion when you're dealing with island destinations or niche remote destinations, what can you share with us?
I think clearly logistics is the most difficult aspect there, especially in the context of Maldives, because Maldives, as you all know, is a cluster of 2,500 plus islands, and they are all broken away into atolls, and each of these atolls have a different ecosystem in terms of the way the waves and the sea waves and the sea conditions sort of treat those atolls. So logistics, while I mean any construction of a resort means a lot of construction materials to be shipped. Now Maldives, from pin to piano, is importing from elsewhere. Of course, for the basic construction materials, India is the most preferred, because of the proximity of distance. But when we send our barges, for example, and it's very different when we deliver construction materials to those remote places up north of the Maldives to that which is down south of Maldives. Because, there are parts in the Maldives which passes through the sea channels, and the logistics plays the most important role. Similarly, it is not only the shipping side, but also, transporting your human resource and providing accommodation and keeping them there is another big challenge, because in terms of entertainment, the lifestyles, there's nothing much a person can do. When a person is within that island, he stays within the island, there's absolutely no entertainment, there's nothing. So it is quite challenging for resort owners to sort of keep their human stock interested and keep them intact with the lowest attrition rate. So these are clearly some of the challenges in these remote islands.
So Thilan, I'm going to ask you the next question and then also indulge you with an extension to that question. Are homestays and vacation rentals really gaining traction? more also probably, and Saurabh, you can also come in here. Why have we not seen, Sri Lanka actually has some lovely experiential hospitality travel brands. Why are they not in India? If I may essentially just ask it as simple as that. Is India not attractive enough?
Pose the
Yeah,
question.
yeah.
So, in my view, the main reason is that prior to 2009, before the end of the conflict, the tourism industry did not have the resources to go out of the country because they were struggling to keep their existing hotels going. But at the end of 2009, including my own board, when I wanted them to go to India, they said, no, there's enough growth opportunity in Sri Lanka because we are coming off a 26-year-old war where we had only 400 or 500 tourists a year. So that was one of the reasons. The second reason, in fact, I'm trying to buck that trend because I want to bring the trails model to a phenomenal tea estate area in India that I identified. Exactly 6 months before the financial crisis of 2008. The reason I wasn't able to raise capital was two reasons. One is because of the financial crisis, and that was the year I moved with my family to the US. So I do want to scale the trails model, whether it is tea or whether it is river or whether it's mountain or whether it is something else. The dispersed resort model works. So I hope I can buck the trend. I want to just add one more point in terms of something that Saurabh you mentioned about Sri Lanka's confused messaging. Now that's something that is not within my control, but what I look at, and this may be useful for India, when you look at the resort, my pet area is the resort segment. How do you create what I call a pocket of excellence within a sea of mediocrity? A lot of hotels that came up in Sri Lanka, first-time entrepreneurs built a whole bunch of mediocre products, wrong location, wrong positioning, etc. And how do you make that, which might be in a very remote location, a destination? And the challenge would be, if you're bringing someone to a destination, unlike in an island in the Maldives, how do you keep that tourist there for at least 3 to 5 nights? That's the challenge, but that we had at Tea Trails, where initially it started with 1.5 nights, and now we're at 3+. And we don't take one-night bookings at all, and we stopped that 10 years ago. And here is what I'm looking at futuristically. Ecology is a given now. I'm looking at climate adaptation. How can I bring in climate adaptive construction methodologies? And I'm only saying this because I'm bound by NDA, but we are hiring Foster & Partners to design climate adaptive design standards for Sri Lanka and Maldives, which is something that I'm very, very excited about, because Foster & Partners, more than any other architectural firm, has a separate practice that has done quite a bit of R&D in this area, and they've practiced some of that R&D in other island destinations. Number two, I look at is going beyond wellness, spirituality. Sri Lanka is the seat of Buddhism. And I'm looking at creating another resort within sight of Adams Peak, where from every location on this estate you can see Adams Peak. Thirdly, it is about, there's another trend in terms of that I'm looking at is private estates. If you are to keep someone in a particular location, you need to have a large quantum of land. So the future developments I'm looking at are in areas where there's 600-700 acres, which Sri Lanka being a small island is usually at a premium. So the next wildlife resort I'm going to get involved in developing would be in 130 acres. It's far away from Colombo. It's a 5-hour drive. But we want to make it a destination because there are 3 wildlife preserves within 1 hour's drive, and we want to keep guests there for at least 4 to 5 nights. And finally, take the concept of curated experiences to another level. So I've been talking too much, so that's basically as far as the future is concerned.
Yeah, and just, I think there's an extended question, so since you're there, I mean, can you take that question, which is, tentatively, how long will Sri Lanka take to bounce back at a stage where we can all go back to Sri Lanka and enjoy our holidays? Your take on it?
Sri Lanka is safe, just go to a hotel with a generator. Okay, so that's my advice. I mean, I have friends who move from houses that don't have generators into a hotel because some of these colonial buildings do not have built-in generators and air conditioning. But the country, the current protests going are absolutely peaceful. I can't take personal responsibility, but we have a disciplined military. That's one of the reasons why we've never had even a whiff or a threat of any military coups or anything of that sort. And people have been very, shall I say, well organized in terms of, and here's a very important point. None of these protests appear to be directed by politicians. In fact, a recent protest that took place when the leader of the opposition came to almost endorse that protest, he was chased out. Buddhist priests have been chased out of protests, saying, look here, we don't want to politicize this. We don't want to bring religion into these protests. This is about economics. We want a new team to manage this country's economy. Yes, you did a great job in winning the war for us, but you can't manage the economy. We want a new team. So please visit our country.
Yeah. So I think we'll have about 6 minutes left. What I'd like to do is give each one of you a minute and a half, your views on 3 things that are going to be, which you consider absolutely as positives. And for hotel owners, operators, brands, a couple of things probably which you think we should be wary about. Rohit, starting with you.
3 things that we should...
So 3 things which you think are essentially the positives, and a couple of things, not negatives, but things that the industry needs to be careful about.
I think the 3 things, I think the Hello?
Yeah.
I think the exclusivity of the destination, the one resort, one island, one resort concept. I think as far as COVID goes, I think the isolation it gives you, and the level of luxury that you see here. Right. So it's true with the product, you don't see anywhere else, the level of service. I think these are the 3 positives. The wary thing is, I think there's oversupply coming everywhere. There are a lot of resorts that are opening. So from an investor point of view, that's a challenge. And other markets opening up. So if you're going to invest in one of these destinations, at least for the Maldives, thinking that it's going to be the way it is for the last 1 year, obviously it's going to reduce. But depending on your positioning, you can build a very sustainable business if you kind of account for how the dynamics can change.
Saurabh, what's giving you sleepless nights and what's making you open the bubbly?
Right, so I'll give out one big positive and just 2 things to watch out for, total 3. One positive is the natural buoyancy. The luxury resort segment is here to stay. The light is shining on the destinations, and whatever you do, you've got tailwinds behind you, so you'll have an accelerated impact. So any good stuff being done, if you're expecting 9, it'll probably get you to 10 automatically because of the spotlight and buoyancy. So there is a, amplifier impact currently being felt on these 2 destinations. So that's the positive, and a big recognition to the luxury experiential resort segment. 2 things to watch out for. Number 1 is the acute service and product fatigue. Coming 2 years of boom business where high occupancies, higher rates have completely flogged the product and have flogged the team morals, right? So there has to be R&R scheduling for the team to re-energize them, to make them prepped up to fight another day. And the the product fatigue has to be clearly identified, and a complete CapEx injected plan needs to be put in place to refresh the inventory and the experience as you bounce back in the season, because what this traditional sense of seasonality as it stood pre-pandemic is probably going to go away. And we'll experience that in the coming summer. It's going to be a very unusual summer, very full and a very prosperous summer for most destinations. And third and the last part is be careful about the business and the geo-segmentation. Who came to the resorts over the last 2 years was a function of who could travel and where they could travel to. Okay? Now with the world reopening, it's one big open playing field again. So we've got to focus on geo-wise, segment-wise strategy in our sales and marketing and distribution plan, because it's no more can be left on an automatic back burner saying whoever comes, I'm just going to auction my inventory. It has to be a very proactive and thoughtful approach there. That's all.
Suresh, your closing remarks, what would you like to share with us?
Well, since again, somebody being involved with the Maldives and watching it very closely from the last 40 years. And I think the tourism in the Maldives is here to stay. It is not going away anywhere soon. In fact, it is diversifying as we talk. Today we have one island, one resort that's meant for the high end. And then you have these guest house concept where a portion of an inhabited island is allocated by the government. That's a mid-sized segment. And you also have safari boats. That is another concept which is really gaining popularity. And what is interesting now in the Maldives is that people are giving the customers a choice of everything. A choice of one night spent on the island, other night on the safari boat, a third night somewhere else. So there's a lot of variety which is being offered in the Maldives. So what I'm trying to say is that it's a destination for right from $100 a night to maybe $5,000 a night. Across segments. So that's one very positive aspect of the Maldives. Another thing is, especially in the context of India, we've seen after the pandemic, Indians have flooded Maldives. I mean, Indians comprised of more than 25% of the total tourism there in the Maldives. Earlier, it used to be China, and now India has taken over that. The Russians were doing phenomenally well, but I think after the Ukraine thing, it's sort of slowed down. But Maldives being, so strategically located, I think one way or the other, you will find, travelers there. And it is, in terms of proximity, you should not forget that it is near India, which is a large market segment. It's very near to, not very far away from China. Russia also has not a very big distance.
Sure.
So, and of course, the eastern side of Europe.
Sure.
So it's sort of very strategically located,
Sure.
and therefore I think it's a great destination to.
Thilan, last 30 seconds to you.
Okay, very quickly, just as much as Siddharth, you would like to see Sri Lankans investing in India, I would like to see more Indians discovering Sri Lanka. Because let me tell you just one vision that I have in another area that I'm involved with. So you've probably seen when you come to Colombo, the 600-acre landfill, which is called Port City. Now, I happen to represent the largest Sri Lankan investor who has taken positions on 17 acres of this land. And the idea of the development there, as I mentioned earlier, we've hired UK consultants to design South Asia's best marina. We are going to be looking at a marina hotel and marina real estate where there's going to be a yacht club, there's going to be entertainment, there's going to be retail, there's going to be nightlife. So I'd like you to have your parties, your weddings, and I've seen how Indians know how to party. So we have a lot in common. You have cricketers, you have Bollywood. So I would like to see more Indians spending much more than 1.3 nights on average in Colombo. And looking at Colombo as almost a satellite city to Bangalore. If I were to have a wish as to what port city should become, the 600-acre reclaimed land, a satellite city to one of your cities, and I'd like to see Indians occupying that. So.
Right. Thank you so much for your time. I had a couple of questions that I got missed, but we're time up, so I'm sure all the panelists are just going to be around if there's anything else that you want to check with them. Thank you very much. Thank you for your time.
Thank you all very much.
Thanks.
Thanks, Saurabh.